On the mining ship, the Ostentero crew members Jez, Liza, Johnny, Amber and Steve-O emerge out of stasis. They had their breakfast eating liquidized food in packets given by the ship's manservant, and wouldn't talk about their payment when they returned to Prime Earth. Suddenly the power went out and emergency circuits kicked in. Amber volunteered to go SND check the power systems. She approached one of the corridors and reactivated the power. When she began to head back, the lights started to flicker constantly and then everything she viewed turned to black. She then out a loud scream and it echoed through the metal structured corridors. Jez and Steve-O were in the small observation deck surveying the Ostentero's flight path and found out the engines have stalled. The power outage had disabled the flight path to Prime Earth and realized they are stuck in the middle of a small asteroid field. Jez went to a small orange panel and pressed 2 switches, and what it did was send a distress signal, hoping nearby space engineers would take the call. Johnny came in and asked if Amber had come back yet. Both men said they haven't seen and they can't get the crew radar to work because of the power outage. Johnny insisted he go and look for her. He went down to system area and see if she was still there. As he looked around, patches of blood were on the metal walls and he wondered if Amber got injured in the process. He opened a metal door and found her in the corner cowering. Johnny asked her if she was okay. Then she stood up and turned to him. Johnny looked in horror and let out a manly scream. Amber's eyes were taken out and blood was dripping from the sockets where they used to be. The TARDIS materializes into a large storage area and Louisa walked out. It was quite cold and the doctor followed her out. He says they are on a mining ship in the middle of space and that the TARDIS had picked up a distress signal. Louisa asked what these people are mining for. The doctor mentions materials similar to ones on Earth and that corporations are fueling societies to keep them going for centuries to come, even if the doctor has harsh views on capitalism. The two walked through a door and were confronted by the lone Ud. It asked if the doctor was the engineer. He replied with a yes and said he deals with machinery on this primitive scale. The Ud leads the doctor and Louisa to the small observation deck to meet with Jez and Steve-O. They introduces themselves and told the doctor what had happened. The doctor says it's a common thing for these type of ships and agreed to take a look. Suddenly Liza raced in and said they need to come urgently. Jez asks why and Liza said Johnny found Amber in a horrific state. The crew headed to the systems area where Johnny was still with Amber and was startled at what they saw. Steve-O told Johnny and Liza to take Amber to the medical bay. The doctor and Louisa moved aside while the crew hurried off. The Ud examined Amber. She was still breathing and had no other physical harm. Steve-O asked Johnny how did this happen. Johnny wasn't sure and just found her in this state. The doctor and Louisa walked in. The doctor went to examine Amber and looked at her eyeless state. Louisa asked what can have done this and the doctor wasn't sure. The doctor, Louisa and the rest of the crew returned to the quarters. The doctor questioned them how did the power went out. Jez said they were floating in space and that's when they accidentally went into this small asteroid field. Liza said the Ostentero must have knocked into one and that would have ceased the power due to its small collision. In the medical bay, Amber got up and slowly walked out. She silently walked to an airlock. She opened it and entered. The alarm went off and the crew raced to the airlock door. They saw Amber on the other side and shouted for her. She turned round to face them and the doors leading to space opened. She got sucked out and was flung into space. The crew members were in mourning at what they witnessed and the doctor just stood back. Just an hour later, Johnny started to feel cold and was shivering. Liza asked if he was alright. Johnny tries to relax but the power started to fluctuate and the section where the two were standing turned dark. The two then started to scream and just like Amber before, their eyes were taken out of their sockets. They released out a wailing groan and turned on each other. Both of them broke their necks simultaneously and died instantly. Jez and Steve-O were shocked by this and the doctor again stood back observing the ongoing chaos. Louisa asked him what can they do and the doctor still was sure. Both bodies were wrapped up in sheets and the Ud placed them in the airlock to release. The bodies floated in the vacuum of space. Jez told Steve-O he needed a little time of himself after all this and Steve-O respectfully okayed it. Jez stared out of the small observation area. A small asteroid floating near the front the Ostentero and it suddenly started to become contorted, revealing a hideous face. Jez panicked. Called out for Steve-O and the doctor. The power went out again and the door behind him suddenly closed. The doctor, Louisa and Steve-O headed to the door. The doctor brought out the sonic screwdriver and opened the door. Jez was dead with the same look as the previous three and the doctor knew he was running out of time. He told Louisa to get back to the TARDIS where she'll be safe and instructed the UD to go with her if she goes next. Louisa and the UD head off, leaving the Doctor and Steve-O. The Doctor looked out at the window and saw the asteroid with its hideous face. He didn't know what its purpose was or how it evolved into what it was. Then it floated off out of view and the Doctor wondered if it was going either him or Steve-O or Louisa or even the UD. The UD returned back to the Doctor saying Louisa is safe in the TARDIS. The Doctor was relieved and the UD then asked where was Steve-O. The Doctor started to get goosebumps and knows he lost the last remaining human crew member. Steve-O slowly walked in and as the Doctor feared he was gone. But this time what was possessing the crew members started to speak and calls itself Belter. Once human was killed by his own people for unknown reasons and somehow his conscious got embedded into a small newly formed asteroid. He waited in the depths of space until the arrival of the Ostentero caught his interest and was going to take revenge on humankind. The Doctor retorted and tried to reason with Belter but was refused. The power had blacked out again and Belter disappeared. The Doctor started to look for him. The Doctor approached the small observation area where Belter was seizing the controls. The Doctor asked what he was doing and Belter said he's planning to destroy the Ostentero. The Doctor retorted with what resources Belter was going to use and Belter said that this mining ship has a self-destruct mechanism built into it because he's got Steve-O's knowledge of the ship. The Doctor's face went a light grey and quickly went out of the room. He used the sonic screwdriver and sealed Belter in. Belter shouted at him to let him out and the Doctor said why doesn't he let his conscious out of Steve-O's body. Belter then said his host hopping power had stopped. He can't transfer himself into another one and he's trapped within. The Doctor just left him in the observation deck and perish. The Doctor assisted the UD with the escape pod. He set the system ready for release and the UD entered in. The Doctor saluted it and the pod took off into deep space. The Doctor then hurried to the TARDIS. The Ostentero was going to destruct and he managed to get in. He set the controls and the TARDIS dematerialized out of the Ostentero. The Doctor opened the doors and looked out at the vacuum of space. The remains of the mining ship are floating and the Doctor stood there for 20 minutes. He closed the doors and returned to the console. 25 years later a salvage ship finds the escape pod with the UD in it. The crewmen retrieve it and the UD awakens from its stasis. What it found out was the salvage crew were working for the Oztach company and knew of the pod's whereabouts. They return the UD to the space station where the Oztach company's officials are situated and imprison it. The Oztach official then accuse it for murdering the crew of the Ostentero and the UD was helpless because it wasn't its fault. The Oztach officials brought up the faults of the UD, mainly the red eye condition, and believe that was responsible for killing all the crew members. They eventually settled on to decommission the UD trade and execute it. They electrocute it and it was reduced to a smoking corpse with the smell of death. Incinerate the corpse and plans were afoot to go with the old model. To use androids. Practical and more cost effective. Those 25 years were a mystery to the families of the Ostentero's crew members and no one ever knows what actually happened. Only the ones who were there on that mining ship.